Make your own window fan. There. See? Now you may be thinking, okay, it's a bunch of whisper fans. What's the point? Why would you want to put this in your window? A couple things. Most houses nowadays are not really built for airflow. Our house we have a choice between air conditioning and heating. If we don't want either running, but the weather's nice outside, but you want air circulating, there's really not a lot of options. You can put a bunch of fans in places. You can even put box fans in the window, blowing in or out to get airflow. They can be noisy. It helps, certainly, it moves air. But I was looking for another option, something that wouldn't be so noisy. And something that would be off the ground so the dogs wouldn't cause problems. We set up a box fan once on the ground, and the dogs found it, and all 4 dogs are huddled around, and just tongues hanging out, and just say, "Wow, this is so cool! You hardly have to breathe in order to pant." It's just like this, So we're chasing them away so we can get the benefit of the fan. So at any rate, there are other options I was looking for. So I was curious. So I actually saw on sale some whisper fans, case fans, as a lot of people call them. Obviously, they vary in size. So you kind of want to measure your window, do some calculations. If you have windows that aren't going to land directly on these proportions, you may need to use like cardboard or a piece of wood or something to help block it off, to help get a little bit of a better seal on it. If you had them blowing in one end of the house and out the other end of the house and the windows, you can get a nice airflow through it. In fact, we had a situation where the AC was broken for a couple days. We had nothing. This was in July, which was not fun. But I found having these, while it didn't make the house cool and nice, it was bearable. You had airflow going through the house. So how do I make these? 2 things to keep in mind. You want to, even if they're all the same size, I would recommend keeping with the same manufacturer, so the voltage and amperage stays the same for demands. And this one has been used, so it's a little dusty. But just zip tied together, pieced together. By using case fans, you have these nice connections for everything to tie into. Works really well. Once you get them connected, since they're all pre-wired and set the same, for the voltage for these Molex connections, yellow is 12 volt and black is your ground or negative. You can always double check with a meter. If you don't have a meter and you're thinking of tinkering around with some of this stuff, you can easily do that. You don't need to go out and buy a $200 meter. This is a simple meter I have. I've seen them under $20. I don't want to give an exact price because they can vary. But a simple meter like this, usually under $20, tells you the polarity, which is probably 85% of the time what I use it for. I just need to know what wire's positive or negative. Get a power supply. This is salvaged off an old Netgear router. I have a box of power supplies. If you've seen any of the videos and some of the things that I've done with salvaging electronics, you'd probably be surprised that I would keep old power supplies. Why ever? This is where it gets the only real technical key thing. You want to look at the specs on the fan, which is going to be 12 volts because that's the power rail delivery. But amperage, A. These are 0.16. What you want to do is have them all the same voltage, and that won't matter. If you had 87 of these, it really won't matter. The key is amperage, because amperage will accumulate. One of these is going to be 0.16. 2 of them are going to be 0.32. And it keeps adding up. You add up your amperage, and you don't want it to exceed what will be delivered on the power supply. This one, 2 or 3 amps. Without a magnifying glass, I'm not going to be reading that to tell you what this one is. But it's under it. I calculated them all out. I made these over a year ago. And I calculated it all out so they were under the amperage. Everything should be fine. If you're not sure, and I did have one, I was using an old power supply, salvage off something else. God only knows how old it was. Connected it up, let it run, put your hand on it. Give it a few minutes of running, put your hand on it. It'll be warm. Warm is normal. If it's not uncomfortably hot, you should be fine. If a power supply goes bad, one of two things will happen. It will just stop giving power, or it will start overheating. I actually saw one, the plastic was soft. You could press your fingernail into it and it was pliable like Play-Doh or clay. It was really, really weird. And it's like, yeah, we want to cut power on that sucker. But I put my hand on it. It was hot. I did not trust it. So it's like, all right, we're replacing that one. That was a bad one. Replace that. Been fine ever since. So in the seasons where we use these, they help a lot. It does lower your bills a bit. You're not having to run the expensive AC, etc. But you just want to make sure you stagger out all your voltages. Now, if you have a large window, just making up numbers, say 3 foot square, and you've got to connect 56 of these guys together to cover it, you may have a problem because that's going to be a large amperage. I would recommend breaking that up into 2 or 3 different circuits with different power supplies on it. Another thing to keep in mind is these don't have high torque. The reason a fan is noisy is it has muscle. So if you put it in a window, box fan for example, blowing out or pulling air in, it's sitting there going, "Rrr," and if the wind or something blows against it, it's not going to care. These, if you have it in the window, and I've seen them spinning away quite happily, a gust of wind hits it, they'll stop, and once the gust of wind shifts away, then they'll start spinning again. So keep that in mind, and that's not a problem. They're not going to short out or fry or create a problem. They're just not going to be able to have the torque to force air out if the wind is trying to push air in. So if you have a consistent wind coming from that side of the house, it really wouldn't be effective to try to put these in that window unless you had them there pulling air in. So you could put on other windows pulling out, having the wind push it in that window, things like that. Depending on your setup and situation. But we find these quite convenient and nice. Areas of the house that are kind of stuffy and poor air flow, put them in there and they really make it nice. So it's a fun little project. Again, they come with their own MOEX connections. So you just connect those all up. What I did is I forget if something died that I salvaged this port connection off of, that I tied into it, or if I just sacrificed a connection. I probably did both. I had a lot of stuff that I salvaged these off of. So you have a generic connection, an old power supply or something that would work with these. You can just chop that off, take the wires you want, put them in there, and you're good. Most of the time, you'll be able to tell which port connections you want to use, because most of the time, these only have 2 wires going into them. I've seen some where of the 4 connections, you only had wires going into 2 of them. So, gee, I wonder which one I need to wire them into. Then you just need to determine the positive and negative on your power supply, connect them up, test it, with the meter as best you can, wire it together, test it, make sure it works. Then you can solder it together. I just have solder with some electrical tape and then a zip tie to keep that on there. Works well. Fun little project. Kept me out of the pool halls for at least a day or 2 or 3. I forget how long I was working on these. So my wife didn't have to worry about me getting into trouble. At least this time.